Put it on this computer. Cool. So should we pray again, or does anyone else want to pray? So I don't do another, or I can do it again.
Do it again, Jason.
All right. All right, Father, we come before you right now. We just thank you for this time that you've allowed us to set apart to look at your scriptures together. And we just thank you for everything you put in each side of every one of us. All the things you're showing us, all the ways you speak through us and enlighten our eyes. I ask that you lift our eyes to see new things, new mysteries of you, that you open up this word to us and have it not only reveal to us new things, but change us on the inside, Father. We just thank you for that. In your name I pray, amen. Exodus 5 and 6, right?
Yes. And so another thing I was kind of thinking of is, and I'm okay either way, again, do we want to continue with the reading of the chapters at the beginning, or I can also, if most of the reason that we're reading the chapter in the beginning is to give context for the rest of our discussion for those who might watch it, then I could paste the scripture into the description of the video. But also it seems like maybe sometimes when we do the scripture in the beginning, it helps us kick off conversations afterwards too. So I don't know if people already, what I'm getting at kind of is like, if any of you guys already have things that you want to talk about that you saw in there, maybe our time would be best spent just picking right up at that and running with it, so that all of our time maybe could be better used. But if you think that the first however long it takes to read these two chapters is worth dedicating to just reading those two chapters, I don't care. I'm just throwing it out there.
We've come this far. We might as well continue the
going
tradition.
For consistency's sake. The tradition, I like it. Sounds good. Does anybody want to volunteer to read?
I can.
Cool.
5 and 6. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Then they said, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, or he may strike us with plagues or with the sword." The king of Egypt said, "Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to your work." Then Pharaoh said, "Look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you're stopping them from working." That same day, Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers and overseers in charge of the people: "You're no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They are lazy. That is why they're crying out, 'Let us go and sacrifice to our God.' Make the work harder for the people so that they keep working and pay no attention to lies." Then the slave drivers and the overseers went out and said to the people, "This is what the Pharaoh says. I will not give you any more straw. Go and get your own straw wherever you can find it, but your work will not be reduced at all." So the people scattered all over Egypt to gather stubble to use for straw. The slave drivers kept pressing them, saying, "Complete the work required of you for each day, just as when you had straw." And Pharaoh's slave drivers beat the Israelite overseers they had appointed, demanding, "Why haven't you met your quota of bricks yesterday or today as before?" Then the Israelite overseers went and appealed to Pharaoh. "Why have you treated your servants this way? Your servants are given no straw, yet we are told, 'Make bricks.' Your servants are being beaten, but the fault is with your own people." Pharaoh said, "Lazy, that's what you are, lazy. That is why you keep saying, 'Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord.' Now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of bricks." The Israelite overseers realized they were in trouble when they were told, you are not to reduce the number of bricks required of you for each day." When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. And they said, "May the Lord look on you and judge you, for you have made us obnoxious to Pharaoh and his officials, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us." Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Why, Lord, why have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, He has brought trouble on this people, and you have not rescued your people at all. 6. Then the Lord said to Moses, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country. God also said to Moses, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty, but by my name, the Lord. I did not make myself fully known to them. I also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, where they resided as foreigners. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the Israelites whom the Egyptians are enslaving, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. And I will bring you to the land I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I will give it to you as a possession. I am the Lord. Moses reported this to the Israelites, but they did not listen to him because of their discouragement and harsh labor. Then the Lord said to Moses, go tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to let the Israelites go out of his country. But Moses said to the Lord, if the Israelites will not listen to me, why would Pharaoh listen to me, since I speak with faltering lips? Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron about the Israelites and Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he commanded them to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. These were the heads of their families. The sons of Reuben, the firstborn son of Israel, were Hanok and Palu, Hezron and Carmi. These were the clans of Reuben. Sons of Simeon were Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Sho, son of a Canaanite woman. These are the clans of Simeon. These are the names of the sons of Levi, according to their records: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Levi lived 137 years. The sons of Gershon by clans were Libni and Shimei. The sons of Kohath were Amram, Izhar, Hebron, and Uziel. Kohath lived 133 years. The sons of Merari were Mali and Mushi. These were the clans of Levi according to their records. Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, who bore him Aaron and Moses. Amram lived 100 years. The sons of Ishar were Korah, Zevig, and Zikri. The sons of Uziel were Mishael, Elzaphan, and Sithri. Aaron married Elisheba, daughter of Amminadab, and sister of Nahshon, and she bore him Nadab and Eleazar. And his sons of Korah were Asir, Elkanah, and Abiasaph. These were Korahite clans. Eleazar, son of Aaron, married one of the daughters of Putiel, and she bore him Phinehas. These are the heads of the Levite families, clan by clan. It was this Aaron and Moses to whom the Lord said, bring the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions. They were the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, about bringing the Israelites out of Egypt, this same Moses and Aaron. Now when the Lord spoke to Moses in Egypt, he said to him, I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, king of Egypt, everything I tell you. But Moses said to the Lord, since I speak with faltering lips, why would Pharaoh listen to me?
Good job on those names.
Yeah, exactly.
I started to regret it pretty instantly.
I think my favorite one, I don't know why, I always the sons of Merari are Mali and Mushi. If that's easy.
I was surprised. It looks like that Moses is the great grandson of the Levi.
Is
I never connected them that close, but that's what it seems like, right?
Hmm.
Sounds legit, sure. What do
Which
you
means
guys?
that
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I'm still stuck on this little piece of nothing.
No,
means
it's something.
Jacob is his great grandfather. I mean, some heavy hitting names in your lineage.
Yeah.
I know my great grandfather's name. It was Wiley. Do you know your great grandfather's name?
No.
That's about the point where we stop keeping track of our of our heritage.
I mean, I guess it was Mark for me, but I don't know.
I think. Well, I remember my great grandfather's name, because it was actually his name and his place of birth that got me into philosophy in the beginning. But his name was Soren, and he was from Denmark. So then I came across Soren Kierkegaard through that, and the rest was history. But yeah, his father's name was Peter, I think. So so that great grandfather is Peter. It's actually Pater, Peder, but I believe that's Peter. And then my other great grandfather was Henry Golden, and his father was either Thomas or Anthony. I actually know like those next two generations from some research that I did, but I don't remember which is which. But yeah, they were from Ireland. And then I have no idea what the rest of my family is. So I know I'm Danish and Irish, and then I've heard that I'm like 6 other things. So
I think though that we generally don't do what they do, which is keep these meticulous records. I was telling Jason that I was reading Chronicles, and the first 9 chapters were genealogies, and I wonder not only, I mean, it was clearly pretty important to them to keep the record of these names and little details about each of these segments of time, and then to record them and report them, which I'm not sure really why.
I actually did like tried to do a short video about that. Here's my thought on that. I don't know why. This is totally just speculation too, because it was Craig, and often this comes up when I'm talking with Craig and stuff too, as we've mentioned this before, is just like how stories stick around and like they're passed down verbally, and it's kind of an evolution of stories, right? But then I've always been confused by that. I'm like, well, why the heck would there be all these weird genealogies? But I don't know. It seems very important. And I don't know if maybe the fact for that, like the reason for that is because it actually keeps it more, I don't know if incarnate is the right word, but more history as well as myth. Because with the Greek stuff, it can get a little lofty to where it doesn't touch you anymore, you know?
This isn't even real. This doesn't have anything to do with this.
Yeah, it becomes all heavenly or something, and this kind of keeps it earth and heaven in a way, maybe. I don't know. That was my thought about it, but because it's got a record of historical figures.
Yeah, especially given that it's not a genealogy of gods. It's just specifically a genealogy of men. So that makes sense that it would kind of be a potential reason for them to be there, is to kind of keep it grounded, or like one side of it at least tethered to earth.
Yeah, it's not a genealogy of gods, and it's not even a genealogy of the greats. Like they don't just list the Levi and the Moses; they list everybody. They don't. I don't know. I mean, it's especially like you're saying, if you think of it as an oral tradition where you're trying to grasp some of the bigger sweeping points.
And I've heard a couple other things about why at least some of the genealogy stuff is there. Is something about the bloodline from Adam to Jesus, and then also something about patterns of sequences of genealogy, right? So like sequences of 7, right? Generations, stuff like that. But nothing like I don't remember any details. I just recall those being. I recall like some some theories or lessons or whatever surrounding the patterns and surrounding the lineage to Jesus. Yeah. And yet I still, at best, skim through genealogies when I'm reading. So
Mitch, I got
maybe
a
I
question for you. Did in Chronicles, those first 9 chapters, did you read them all out loud?
No, I rarely read that loud, but I tried to read. I tried hard not to skim, but my brain is instantly skimming, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm doubling back and just trying to see if there's anything I might have missed. Or
Yeah.
Well, you know, too, like it's really hard for us to keep in mind. Well, it's really hard for me to keep in mind, I should say. Like, we have a very different frame for reading than when the scriptures were first like produced, right? Like when they were first readable by the select few people who could read and who could get their hands on scripture in whatever form they were in. Like I imagine, like I like to imagine, even if you zoom forward until like to the day when the printing press first was in operation and everyday people got their hands on books, like even the most garbage of books was probably so fascinating, right? It's like there's no television, there's no radio, there's no, like it's literally just like your first foray, other than sitting around the fire and exchanging stories, which is not trivial, but it's your first ability to like enter into some other point of view or experience, sort of outside yourself, but also put yourself there by reading. So I feel like there's like, it would have been more natural to be fascinated with genealogies back then than it is now, even though, you know, people are certainly still fascinated with their bloodline today, but there's something to the fact that like we kind of like tend to skim through genealogies now, whereas I'm sure when whatever, I'm sure just a few hundred years ago that was not the case. You know, that was like, oh, okay, wow, like so and so is descended from so and so. I don't know.
I've heard that people weren't able to read out loud. They weren't able to read silently, only aloud, because they didn't have the training. Like if you were looking at a book up until just a couple hundred years ago, you couldn't make sense of it unless you read the words aloud.
I still have that problem.
does it seem like a magic trick the first time somebody processed something in their head? It'd be great to do.
Mm.
That's interesting.
So what do you guys think of the like towards the end of the second chapter? I mean, we can hop back towards the beginning, but just that he seems to make like an extra emphasis that these are the same Moses and Aaron. Like just it just always seemed kind of odd to me that it's like he says it at least twice. Like these are the same Moses and Aaron to whom the Lord said, bring out the children of Israel from the land of Egypt according to their armies. These are the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bring out the children of Israel from Egypt. These are the same Moses and Aaron. It just seems like a little bit repetitive, and I'm not sure why.
This is because Moses was self-conscious. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah.
no, that is interesting. I never really caught that.
You guys make of this sense? What do you make of the idea that we have these genealogies that give us a ballpark estimate of what year, let's say, Adam and Eve would have lived, or at least we have the sense this is on the scale of thousands of years and not hundreds of thousands of years, but we have material reason to believe that humans have been around longer than that. How do you process that?
So
Ian,
I mean, there's
go ahead, you go.
like a couple of things that I'm like not certain of, but that I've heard of that sort of could go some way towards explaining that, even if you take the Bible completely literally, is there, so the years across time are not consistent, right? Potentially not consistent. So in other words, like a year in Genesis, like a solar, whatever year in Genesis is not the same duration of time as a year, solar year, like whatever this year. And so by our material dating methods today, if like these indicate that human beings have been along for much longer than what would be suggested by studying genealogy and whatnot in the Bible, assuming that the years were consistent with the years today, right? But if the years aren't, if a year back in the times shortly following the creation were significantly longer than our years today, am I saying that right? Yeah, then that would go some way towards explaining it. And then also there's apparently like, oh man, I don't remember which like really bizarre miracle type thing that God did that like messed with the Earth's rotation. I think there's like a couple of things.
There's one part where he turns the sundial backwards.
Right.
That's probably not what you're talking about though. But then there's another part where
The sun stands
Joshua,
still.
yeah, the sun's, yeah. And then I've heard someone say that the flood was just a tilting of the earth.
That I heard as well. Yeah.
Oh,
Those are, yeah, those are basically like the things that come to mind for me, other than there also being that like weird period, like whatever, between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 or something like that, where it was like there's the two like maybe different creation accounts, right? And I don't know.
yeah.
So there's a lot of question marks for me. I have no answers.
I talked about this with Mitch once before. Is like in the Genesis account, the evening and the morning being the first day is before the sun and the moon are actually created. So we have no idea what that is. I've heard other people make the case that like time is just relative, like it's according to our consciousness how it maps out. So, but the other thing too is I was thinking like I've thought before you could actually read this with an evolution viewpoint, because it literally says the earth brought forth the animals. So it looks like if you were to put that in a film, it would kind of look probably like that Noah movie with Russell Crowe, and it shows the creation and it kind of shows the evolution thing. But then you get to when this is what I mentioned to Mitch. I was like, I don't think you can get around the fact that it says God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed the breath in his nostrils, the breath of life, and man became a living being. So like that could just be a point. If you even took the evolution viewpoint, which I don't know that I do necessarily, but you could say humanity evolved from the dust of the ground up to this one moment in time when they received God consciousness. How Mitchell put it. It was like this moment in time where like the breath of God entered them, and then it was like they looked up or something in a sense and had God consciousness. And that's when he became a living being or a living soul or nephesh, whatever the word is. I don't know. So that I don't know that I necessarily hold that viewpoint, but that was my like thought about it, that it seems to work that way. But then I guess like you said, from that point, it seems to map out what are we at, 6,000 years or something from that point, or from that Adam that it suggests there, I think. So,
And it seems like even if a year, a year at the beginning wasn't the same duration as a year now, we still have a commitment to, there were this many human lifespans between Adam and Christ, which it seems like that pushes you into a position to say, well, human lifespans were much longer back then. And a day didn't mean, a year didn't mean what a year means today. Or it pushes you into a position where it's not pretty. It seems to me. I'm wondering if you guys have any way to make that not look as bleak as it appears to be, because it's if we believe that in a literal way, creation there was nothing alive on the earth prior to that moment.
What do you mean by bleak? That doesn't mean pretty. Can you put more concrete?
An interpretation where you say that if we follow this genealogy back, that person, Adam, was the first human being who witnessed the first life on earth. That interpretation looks bleak, given the evidence. And maybe not, but that's just the way it seems to me.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things that, like, I never want to rob anybody of their when I first started to believe, I used to envy people who had like very simple faith, where they would just be like, the Bible is literally true. And it was just like, that's that. And, they could just roll with that, and like, I always wanted to kind of have that. But like over the years, I've kind of become grateful for having a more critical, I don't know if critical is quite the right word, but like, I'll just use it for now, like a critical lens that I look through things. And my I guess personal way of reconciling this is like, I never wanted to allow my faith to be constructed in such a way that it could be broken by some scientific proof. Like like if like I know people who, if somehow they could be proven beyond a doubt that the creation account wasn't like a literal 7 days or something along those lines, right? That there was like some factual disproving that happened that breaks the Bible for them, and then for them it would break their faith. It would like shatter their faith. And so I think I've always been kind of careful to be fine with the idea that certain areas of the Bible, if not the Bible in its entirety, could be distillations of sort of what I think this is kind of what actually really attracted me to Jordan Peterson in the first place, was his way of looking at the Bible through a psychological lens, sort of in this mythological, symbolic way but also saying, as he would describe, like, hey, I'm going to be describing the Bible to you or analyzing the Bible in this way. That doesn't mean that I don't think there's a deeper truth to it, or that none of it's literally true, right? So, because that's kind of where how my faith has kind of been constructed over the years, is just even if, like, to me, it's not, it wouldn't be that it's just symbolically true, right? Or metaphorically true that the earth was created in 7 days, or whatever the case is. It's that, like, that's still just as true as if it was literally true, right? So yeah, I currently don't know how to articulate that any better. I had a I had a interesting day at work today, so my brain is a little fuzzy, but yeah.
I'm curious, you said that it means, well, you said that it could be just as true if it wasn't true in a kind of strict literal sense. What do you mean by that?
My experience is, I'm hesitant to say it's not literally true. I think the reason I'm hesitant is because if it's poetry, if it's written poetically, my experience is that tends to slap me in the face. I don't know why. It's like, I'll be like, oh, it's just poetry or something. And it's not literal or something, but then it just happens to you and you're like, what the heck? And so, I mean, even in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So if you read it poetically, it just tends to happen. Like, it's in the beginning. Like, I mean, I don't know if this whole creation story would map on to also just the birth of a child, because they get circumcised the 8th day. So maybe it could map on that way as well. Like, if it's taken poetically, and then it becomes literal, because in the beginning of a new life, it starts to map out. George MacDonald, I think, had this quote where he said, all of nature is man turned inside out. And I've heard people read, I think, this Genesis passage the same way, as like, even coming to Christ, they've read it that way, as like an internal creation happening within them. But the problem with taking it literally is then it doesn't happen again. If you take it literally and pin it down and say, hey, this has to be 6 days, this has to be 7 days, then it's just this one moment in time in history, and it doesn't happen. Like Jordan Peterson says, it's more true because it's happening all the time. And it's like, if you make it just historical, then it stops happening. But it seems to happen all the time. More so to me, I'm a little less clear on the first chapter. The chapter 3 in Genesis, I'm just like, that happens all the time to everybody, it seems like. But
is that where the foreskin gets thrown at people? Because that does happen to me all the time. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. What did you mean though, Craig, by when you said it's bleak if we take it too literally? Is that kind of what you mean? It just stops speaking, or what do you mean?
Well, if you're committed to an interpretation of this story, you say that 8,000 years ago, Adam walked the earth. He was the first human being. There were no animals or plants before that. There were no humans before that. Then you have to say, one thing you could say is the methods that we use to date matter and fossils are faulty, and that all the life that we think happened in the past, hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years actually was in the last 8,000 years, and our methods are faulty.
Mm-hmm.
That's one route. I don't know a different way to explain.
So that's I'm sorry, you want to go, Jason?
No, you can go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that actually, so the whole like carbon dating thing actually came to mind recently for me when gosh, I'm gonna like whatever fanboy some more on Jordan Peterson, I guess. But like I was listening to a fairly recent episode of his where he was talking about somehow global warming came up, and he was talking about how, you know, the best estimates regarding global warming have a certain margin of error, and that margin of error grows with each year. The farther out you go predicting and trying to predict into the future, right? To the point where like the farther you go out, the less sure you can be about the effects of global warming or whatever the case is. And it's just the same, you know, Jordan Peterson mentions evolution pretty frequently, right, when he talks, which is kind of funny to me because I feel like you can, like the concepts related to evolution in terms of like survival of the fittest and whatnot make sense, but in terms of the dating stuff of how far back a certain species goes or something like that, it's just it's also prone to these margin of errors that grow the further back you estimate, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that is a valid potential explanation for.
That's what we're going to call you from now on. You're the explanator.
Explanator. That's what I feel like tonight. I cannot talk, but I think it's a potential valid explanation for how evolution can both be, that can be true, and a literal take on the biblical mathematics of how long humans have been around for. Yeah, I think that's seems reasonable.
Someone's going to have to fact check me on this, but I'm not an expert on carbon dating, but my sense is that it works by detecting the amount of particles that have left, that are yet to be emitted by this atom, and this is the basis of how atomic clocks work. You have these elements, these atoms, and they periodically emit particles through beta decay. It's the weak nuclear force. And so we either have to say the laws of particle physics have changed. I mean, that's the specific claim that we'd have to be making.
I guess I kind of have a question with that though. Because you said, the thing I was going to say is where I agree with you. I think it's pretty bleak if you take it very literally, because then your frame can be rocked very easily. Because it's very, I guess you would say, too much order or something. It's too orderly. You're trying to put it in a box too much and say it has to be literal 6 days or my whole worldview crumbles. So that's why it's very hard for people to hear that it might not be. But then at the same time, could you take that same viewpoint and apply it to the carbon dating you just mentioned too, that we're almost boxing that in too much, and that can't be. I don't know, ever since you sent me that weird math video where like it just like where math isn't true anymore, and I'm like, what's going on? But it seems like that's what I mean. It seems like reality is that way though. If you start to try to grab onto something too tightly in too much order and be like, this is this, it seems to get away from you. And it's you have to learn to have that balance of what you have of not clinging on to things too tightly.
Maybe we should reconsider the way that we teach these stories, because the way we teach them to people on average is that we say these are true historically, and then have fun stumbling over this later when you figure out that there's major reasons for implausibility. it's not, it's just not coherent, like maybe we should think about how to teach this in a way that's coherent, or how to interpret in a way that's coherent, or else come up with a way of updating it.
Could you, I mean, I completely agree with you. I was always taught very, very literal 6 days. And so it was kind of
Yeah.
kind of rocked me when you start reading it for yourself. But do you think we could approach it and say, look here, there's the first day, there's no sun, there's no moon. And that's how we calculate time. So in the book of Enoch, these angels give Enoch a tour throughout the universe. He's going through all these doors. But I remember the first time I read it, they're just talking about all these. It didn't even make sense to me because I don't know how to picture it in my head, but I just started picturing it as like all the galaxies are spinning around each other like a clock. Like not just our galaxy, not just our sun, but every single galaxy. And so I was thinking, if God is actually light, if God is the source, then one day here could be taken as all the galaxies, the one rotation around that one source, which could be millions of years. I mean, I don't know. So you could look at it that way and say, we don't know what this day is. I think the word is yom, which just basically means span of time. So nobody is really certain on what that even means. One other theory that I have heard that I don't really like, because it's just a bunch of speculation that is opinion, and then it gets taken up as doctrine. And I've also heard it taught this way, is that between verses 1 and 2, there's like a pre-Adamic race. There's like a whole different, and that's when the dinosaurs live. And it's never really resonated with me. For some people that works for them, but it's like in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Pause, all the dinosaurs, all the Neanderthals, all that stuff. And then he smushes it down, and now then like wants to redo it, and then it's without form and void, and then he starts over. And so, which, I mean, you could put that in there. It just
It doesn't really seem like the text gives you any license to do that.
No, right.
no.
Yeah, it screws up a bunch of doctrinal type stuff too. Like, I would think.
And they quote a verse in Jeremiah. So like they actually do, to get to like kind of steel man them or whatever, they do actually, it just still does not work for me. They do pull on this part in Jeremiah to back that theory. I beheld the earth, and indeed it was without form and void. That in the heavens they had no light. I beheld the mountains, and indeed they trembled, and the hills moved back and forth. I beheld, and indeed there was no man, and all the birds of the heaven had fled. I beheld, and indeed the fruitful land was a wilderness, and all its cities were broken down at the presence of the Lord by his fierce anger. So then, for thus says the Lord, the whole land shall be desolate, yet I will not make a full end. For this shall the earth mourn, and the heavens above be black, because I have spoken, I have purposed, and will not relent, nor will I turn back from it. So they use that somehow to like insert that passage in between those two first verses in Genesis, which never really made sense to me either. But that's when I heard that theory taught, that's what they used, that part in Jeremiah. Mitch, you're so quiet. Tell us what you think.
I think there's a handful of good theories, and I think if we thought hard, we could come up with a couple more. I think I like the one that Jason said. If there's a world in which a lot of biological history happened, and then Adam was created by being imbued with consciousness. I think that's a really neat way of looking at it. And it jives with the genealogies, even if not with the 6-day creation story. Although I don't think of the way it's being taught at large in the church is incoherent. And in fact, I think those that are being especially dogmatic about it has to be these 6 literal days are few and far between, and the people that want to to, when I think of the people that taught me the Bible, I don't remember them as being stuck on the, if they're saying to me, watch out for people who are trying to tell you about this theory or evolution, which, of course they would say, I really think that at the heart of that was, watch out for people who are trying to take your trust away from the Lord and put your trust in something lower or lesser, like yourself or mankind. Yeah, I think that principally the teachings about creation are coherent, and they give us what we need.
Yeah, I think this somehow relates to that it's no mistake that the tree in the garden, right? Like that was like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that we weren't supposed to eat from. There's something to that, and how we've since then progressed faster and faster, with little interruptions, sometimes significant interruptions here and there, towards sort of exploding the effects of gaining the knowledge of good and evil through like technological advancement. I can't picture in my head, in, let's say, like pre-literate times, when people are being taught or are being read Genesis, let's say, I don't picture like a conversation like this happening, right? And I think it's necessary now for people to have these conversations, and I think that that's regrettable that it's necessary now for us to have these kinds of discussions, right? Like it would be but I don't think that means that in pre-literate times people were less intelligent. I think we've kind of sacrificed what would have been considered common sense for these like dancing around abstractions and kind of zooming in and zooming out, which I just do all day long. It's so annoying. I feel like, I probably have this tendency to think that someone who has a simple faith, or let's say someone thousands of years ago or tens of thousands of years ago, who wouldn't have the quote unquote benefit of having discussions we're having now, could probably articulate to me or even make me feel like an idiot for pondering these things or something. I don't know. It seems like there's probably something very, very obvious about reading these things that we've lost since then. I don't know. It's just a sense that I get. And I think it has to do with the compound effect of eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I don't know. Yeah. As a side tangent, in case we want to veer off somewhere else, but we can stay on this too. But before I forget, in case we do want to talk about this as well, one thing that like stuck out to me this past time reading these two chapters was anywhere where it mentions like God remembering, let's say like God remembers his promises, or God remembers his covenant, or God remembers whatever the case is, like, what do you think it means? So I just jumped from talking about overthinking things, but it seems funny to me, the idea of God like remembering something, right? There's something kind of silly about that, right? I mean, like, I don't know. Especially considering, like, I don't know what his relation to time is, and
Maybe he's all knowing, but not all remembering.
maybe.
It was in there somewhere.
Yeah.
It's probably somewhat related to the memorial aspect. I have this, I don't know how to say it right, but maybe kind of like an offering in a way, like a memory as an offering, or remembering in a like if you broke the word apart, like a remembering, like he's taking giving attention to this one thing.
Yeah.
Not like he forgot. He's just gonna attend. Yeah.
Reassemble.
Yeah, that's what I was getting. I think that's what tripped me up, is that I was thinking, okay, if when I'm saying that I remember something, most of the time when I say that, it's because I had forgotten it. So I was kind of projecting that onto, like, when God says that he remembers something, like, well, how could he have forgotten it? Well, no, like, when we're remembering something, we're just like picking something of which we're aware and focusing our attention on it, right? Like, that's kind of what remembering is. Like, I didn't forget that 2 + 2 = 4, but I recall it to my mind. Like, I remember it when the question is asked, like, what's 2 + 2? No, it's 4.
Yeah.
So,
I think you could read it as God didn't forget them, instead of God remembered.
right, yeah.
Yeah. Made me think of Simba. Remember who you are. I don't think it's the same as what you're talking about. But yeah, I'd like to get into the have discussions a little bit more about memory. I've been wondering about that because I feel like my I feel like my context for it has always been wrong in the past, or not complete. Maybe not wrong, but incomplete. Because I think I asked Paul Vanderklay about that, as I asked him if memory, if the purpose of memory is hope rather than like warning or something, which seems to me to be better. But I do think it served as warning, because a lot of times I've heard people say we remember stuff so we don't repeat the past. I think Jordan Peterson will say that too. Like, we remember things so we don't fall into the same error. And I think that's very, very true. But then at the same time, like, well, what do you do with lost loved ones? Like, what do you do with those memories that just plague you? Like, they suck. Like, when you lose someone you love, it's like it's like all the memories are a blessing and a curse at the same time. They're bittersweet, and unless you can have some sort of lofty hope for it, it's like, what's the purpose of that? Like, what's the purpose? Why not just forget them? Because it's almost harder to deal with that. Like, it seems to me that if the purpose, there would be an end, a telos or whatever. Like, there would be, and then that would mean the memory would have something to do with the future, or otherwise, why would you hold on to it? Why not just drop it and walk away? So I feel like there's some sort of association with hope that I haven't quite put together yet. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
That sounds right, Jason. We overcome through testimony, after all.
Yeah, and people often say when a loved one dies, you often hear people say something like, well, they live on through you, something like that, right? People kind of say those kind of things. And I think there's something very literally true about that. Like, I think in our last conversation, when we talked about the foreskin, I think I mentioned something about how my children in a literal sense are sort of my earthly eternal life, if that makes sense. Like, so when I die, in some real sense, I live on through them, even if they, let's say, like, were bitter and resentful against me, like if I was a bad father or something like that, and they were bitter and resentful about it and lived their lives according to that, it's still, even just like biologically, psychologically, whatever ways, like after I die, if they're still alive, I am still impacting their world through them, right? Because if it wasn't for me, they wouldn't be. And so whatever they're doing and whoever they're impacting wouldn't have been impacted if it wasn't for me having them as my children. And I think memory, that's sort of more of a tangible, literal way of a memory living on, right? Like a biological memory, like in their DNA. I am memorialized in their DNA, right? But also, for instance, my sister passed away a few years back, and in a very real way, to the extent that I remember her, right, she continues on in some form, not as literally as my children carry me on, but I feel like there's not only this like purpose and memory of avoiding, let's say, not burning your hand again on the stove because you've touched it and now you remember, like, oh, I'm going to avoid that in the future, and also not also beyond the in addition to the hope aspect that Jason was talking about. I think there's also just a carrying on of what came before, right? So it's like participation in eternity somehow. There's an aspect of memory that's a participation in eternity, I feel, something like that.
That's beautiful. Jason says hope, and then there's a participation in eternity, and then there's that very element, the one about the stove where you're it's a protection. It has that service, and I think too there's a glorification aspect to it, or a worship components to memory.
Yeah.
God's always asking people to commemorate, or remember, or memorize, or talk about what he's done in the past. That might be another element to the purpose of memory.
Yeah, that's good.
What do you guys think about the few instances when God says, don't remember this? Like was it the Amalekites? He says, wipe out the remembrance from under heaven.
Yeah.
That was pretty heavy.
Yeah, and Lot's wife turning back and turning into a pillar of salt, right?
Yeah, it's interesting.
There's something about that, yeah.
In the Amalekites, what I always thought was interesting is he says, I'm just gonna read it, because he says, like, you shall not forget to wipe out their remembrance or something. It's like, it's just weird. He says, like, remember to not remember them. And I was just like, it's very weird. Yeah. Let's see. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you were coming out of Egypt, how he met you on the way and attacked your rear ranks. all the stragglers at your rear, when you were tired and weary, and he did not fear God. Therefore it shall be, when the Lord your God has given you rest from your enemies all around in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance, that you will blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. Just like,
Pretty ironic that we wrote that down.
yeah, yeah, I know, right?
I said, quick, write that down.
Oh, can I ask, it's going back to Exodus now. I mean, we can go back into the Genesis part because I love talking about Genesis, but I wanted to ask in the Exodus, what did you guys have anything to say about the uncircumcised lips? Any ideas on that? What that even means? Or well, your version, Mitch, said it said something
Faltering.
else. Faltering.
Yeah, if footnoted with uncircumcised. Yeah, it goes back. I mean, I still feel as confused as 2 weeks ago about circumcision and a lot of this, or as last week. Such a weird refrain in the Bible that you apply it to something like lips or something like an uncircumcised heart, like you get in. I think am I making that up? Maybe.
No, you're not.
Yeah, no. So
Okay.
I don't know what comes to mind just really quick is so it's not what goes into a man's mouth that makes him unclean, but what comes out of his mouth. And so uncircumcised lips are lips that aren't set apart for God, right? And so and there's tons of warnings throughout Proverbs about speaking hastily or whatever the case is. And then the heart, like uncircumcised heart, so out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks, right? So there's like I feel like there's this chain of chain of circumcision, right? This chain of like setting something apart and aside for God. And then as far as like the literal circumcision, man, I really hate that word. I can't stop using it. The literal circumcision. It seems to me that it's about setting apart to God your future. I don't know, because there's something about, right, your sexual organs that's like specifically designed for your future and like your continuance even after you're like I was just talking about, like your continuance after
It's a
you're
contract.
gone even.
It's a contract with the future.
Yes, exactly. And so like, whereas your heart, right? Your heart is formed by that which you treasure, right? That which you treasure is formed by where you kind of focus your attention over time. So your heart is sort of formed by your past. And then what you speak is the present, and then your reproductive organs are for your future. So I feel like there's something there about like those three specific things being singled out for circumcision: your lips, your heart, and your reproductive organs. Like that's seems to cover like past, present, future kind of thing. I don't know. Yeah, that seems plausible.
I wonder if the heart would have had the same erotic connotation it has today.
Can you say more about that? What do you mean?
Well, the lips and the phallus are erotic body parts, and the heart today we associate with romance. I wonder if that association was present back then.
If you look at Song of Solomon, might be in there. That'd be my best guess.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned time and contract with the future, because and this might just be my how I feel about the number, but they circumcise on the 8th day. And to me that always, because the figure 8, you turn it sideways, it's the infinity sign. So I don't know if that was Hebrew, somewhere in the Hebrew number for that. The only thing I do remember, there are places where it says on the 8th day and hereafter. So it kind of, I can't remember where that is, but I remember reading that in there before, where it kind of almost seems like it kind of has that, a little bit of that connotation with it. Something about this eternal working or something, or like you're stepping in, because it's always 7 days, but then there's this 8th day that comes up very rarely, and it's like you step into this 8th day and it's something else. I'm not sure what to make of it. I don't know if it's a new creation. I'm not really sure.
Anybody know offhand if there's any scriptures referring to like circumcision of the mind?
I don't know. I know there's something about circumcision of the fruit when it's talking about the land. There's uncircumcised fruit or whatever that means.
Huh.
I don't know about the mind. You might be right on that though. Might be something.
Because I was thinking in our discussion, we just had about memory, and the last thing that was mentioned is memory can also be an act of worship. Interesting. I don't know.
I'm eyeballing this structurally here now, and Moses says, why would Pharaoh listen to me since I speak with uncircumcised lips? And then it goes into the family record. Like, oh yeah, Moses and Aaron, these guys from Jacob, from Levi, these guys. And then he repeats that again. Now, he told them to go to Pharaoh and say everything I told you. And then Moses said, why would he listen to me? Because I have uncircumcised lips. I wonder why those moments are sandwiching the genealogy. Is that to suggest that, oh, by the way, he doesn't speak with uncircumcised lips. He comes from the people of the covenant.
He's the guy.
Yeah, he's the chosen one.
Yeah, I brought this up to Craig in a text earlier. I wonder, like in chapter 4, I wonder if it has anything to do with. Well, it's kind of been confusing to me because Moses says, "Oh my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue."
Yeah.
And I don't. But then what's confused me is in the book of Acts, it says that he's like very well trained and everything, right? So it's weird that he would say, like if he's trained, it's Acts chapter 7 verse 22 that and so like if he's trained in all the let's see, and Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in words and deeds. So it's like, why would he say Pharaoh wouldn't listen to him?
I remember, I just wagged my finger at you, but it was just to say that I remember you mentioning this before and us having a discussion about it. And now you got me thinking that maybe when Moses is saying this in chapter 4, that he's talking about his lips being uncircumcised, or he's talking about his way of speaking being uncircumcised rather than being actually slow or poor, rhetorically. And now that we have this bit in 6, that doesn't feel nutso.
Do you mean that he is more Egyptian than he is Israelite?
Yeah, and that's why Aaron comes. He was fun, Aaron.
'Cause
He's
Aaron-
total Hebrew. He has the circumcised lips that you're so worried about not having.
Yeah, like Aaron grew up in
Uh,
Queens. Aaron's a real deal.
Yeah. So maybe he's really not talking about his rhetoric at all in 4 or 6, but in Acts we are actually, talking about his rhetoric. He
He
did
may-
have the chops.
It makes you wonder what language they were speaking. Would Moses have
Yeah.
been? You would
There's the
imagine that
chance.
the Israelites were using their own language when they spoke to each other, and likely Egyptian when they spoke to Pharaoh. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything to that, but it certainly, the way we read it, we kind of just assume that they're all speaking English.
In the film version they are. So
Yeah, right.
Yeah, they all have nice British accents.
You're speaking hieroglyphics. So there's an Asterix and Obelix little cartoon that I watched on a plane one time, and they were doing that. Like he'd open his mouth and like a wave would fly out of his mouth.
Mm.
It's kind of fun. I wonder though, do you think there might be Craig, do you think there might have been like any sort of mingling like in the Hebrew language with the Egyptian? Because I've heard that especially the old Hebrew texts like this Exodus and Genesis and stuff, there's like there's like images in the letters or something like that.
I don't know anything about that.
Oh, okay.
Do you mean the actual text themselves, the physical objects they look like they were written with an Egyptian like technique?
I don't know.
Am I misinterpreting you?
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I mean. I don't know if
Mm.
that's the case, because I think I've heard like there's one letter and it looks kind of like an ox or something, and so there's this kind of subconscious, I guess, connotation with it. When you read it, it's like you kind of associate all these different things with this one letter. And Jacob, this guy on the Discord server, when I was talking to him, he said when you get into the Hebrew language, it's like you're diving into the water. Like when you just read it in English, it's like you're just looking at the pool. But when you actually get into the Hebrew, it's like you're swimming in it, sort of. So it's like there's all these extra layers to it that I don't know. If Moses kind of wrote, or somehow, I don't want to say like, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I just don't know if like there's the idea of the hieroglyphics is you're writing in pictures, right? As far as I understand, and there it seems to be like there's still some of that in the Hebrew language. But I don't know if it came from Egypt, or if, just was kind of a thing they did back then. But
I know it's interesting. You get me thinking about. Now I'm looking at the letters here and wondering what my subconscious associations with all of them are.
the Hebrew letters.
The English letters.
Oh,
These do have certain shapes, and maybe that's influencing the way I think about these words.
I never thought about that either. The English letters. Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that. Why you would write it that way? Because there's probably a reason why you'd shape it that way. Did anything else stand out to anybody in this? Or
I thought it was weird that he didn't originally ask to free them permanently. He just said, "Let us go and do Burning Man for a couple days."
Do you think he was trying to dupe them, or was he serious? Like, we'll do 3 days and come back.
I don't think he was trying to dupe him. I think he was serious about it.
Was that is that what God instructed him to ask for?
I think so, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's clear necessarily. I thought he said to just say, "Let my people go," and then
I don't remember him being specific.
yeah, because I mean, he. It seems like that is the idea was God was saying, "Bring my people back to this mountain where I met you, and sacrifice to me," and yeah, and it says just like what, like 3 days or something, and because at one point Pharaoh, I think it's later on after some of the plagues, Pharaoh's finally like, okay, you can go 3 days into the wilderness, and I was like, all right, we're gonna go, and then Pharaoh says, who's gonna go with you? And Moses says, everyone, and he's like, no way, I'm not letting everybody go with you, like, oh, you're leaving. Maybe because he thinks they won't come back, because he says you. Basically, I think he says you and your men can go, but your little ones and your cattle, everything you're kind of tied to, your livelihood or whatever has to stay. And then the more plagues after that. I'll see where it's at. It's somewhere. Might be after the locust. I don't know. No. One thing I thought was really interesting as well, though, while I try to find that, is that it was chapter 5, verse 3, and I never noticed it before, but he says us. He says, lest God fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword. Like he says, let us go into the wilderness or God's gonna fall on us. So it's like, I don't know why I noticed it before, but when they're not let go, the pestilence falls on Egypt. So it's like the Hebrews aren't disassociating themselves with Egypt in a way. Does that make sense? Like it's not until chapter 8 where God says, I'm going to make a distinction between you and the Egyptians, and I'm going to plague them. And so it's like it just kind of reminded me of Daniel a little bit. Like when Daniel prays for Israel, he prays in a way where he's like, he associates himself with like the whole nation, and he says we have sinned. And Daniel wasn't really a part of, like, he was kind of grew up in Babylon, but he associates himself with all this sin, or so it's kind of like there seems to be like a connection with just humanity in general, I guess, in that.
It's very Christ-like when you tell the Daniel story.
Huh?
Really, part of it, I was saying it sounds very Christ-like when you tell it that way.
Yeah. It is in Daniel for sure. He kind of takes sins on himself in a way and tries to repent on behalf of the nation. But this kind of seems like, yeah, like they are really like kind of that idea that God is all their father, like he's everyone's father or something. Like they're still part of Egypt in a way. I'm not sure what to make of it. I don't know, but
There's this really great line in Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, where Darth Vader comes to Cloud City and he makes a deal with Lando Calrissian to take away Han Solo, but he's going to leave the princess and the Wookiee. And then he says, later on, I'm going to take them too. And Lando says, we had a deal. And he says, I've altered the deal. Pray that I don't alter it further. And it feels like God did a little Darth Vader here, where he said, I thought you just wanted to take him into the wilderness. He said, pray that I don't alter the deal again.
This deal keeps getting worse. That's funny. Man, I thought you guys were going to be picking apart the straw and the bricks.
did we try to do that last time? You want to do it some more? Let's get into that. It's the other part that comes to mind when it talks about straw and brick is when Israel's doing it with their false prophets. the peace when there's no peace type thing. And God says, you're building up your walls with like untempered mortar or something. And it's yeah, I don't know if it's related or not, but just I don't think it is necessarily. This seems to be just more like making a man-made mountain type thing or whatever. Man, I'm really trying to find that part, Greg, with the Lando part there.
Did you crack open your Empire Strikes Back novel? You,
The George Lucas Bible.
No. It's just the
Yeah.
part where
Shooting.
Imagine if someone like just made a whatever like 40-hour recording of Wookiee sounds and released it as a Wookiee reading the Bible. It'd be amazing. It's probably like an easy buck to be made by somebody.
Yeah.
So do you guys have any thoughts on yeah, I know we touched on this a little bit last time, but do you have any more thoughts on chapter 6 where he says he appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty, but my name, the Lord, was not known to them. I've also established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their pilgrimage in which they were strangers.
This is to me really good, that you have this image of the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob serving God despite not knowing him fully, and banking on this promise from him and acting accordingly, and trusting that he was sovereign. And I love this part later in verse 9. Moses reported what God had said to the Israelites because of discouraged and labor. So they've got, of course, these reasons for not believing him, and they're not crazy reasons. Like, it makes sense that they would have their doubts. I thinking about the sovereignty of God in this portion. Something, and he's not fully revealing everything. And why does he keep doing that? Why does he ask us not? Or why does he give us only a part and then have us fill in the rest with faith? Ooh, when he knows there's so many afflictions and things to keep us from a full faith. I don't know.
Are you saying like God is revealing himself little by little as the story of man progresses?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if, I'm losing the word right now, but I'm not sure if it's accumulative either. Necessarily. I just think it seems to be his practice to reveal only a part, and then the crux of the crux of the whole story is faith, and that implies something that isn't evidenced, and a lot of good reasons to not trust in something that isn't evidenced. And so it's an odd manner of revelation for God to me. That's the way God reveals himself to mankind, is in part. And then the name that he gives, he's revealing a part, not only of himself, but of his plan. And the name that he gives is the Lord. Like, I am the governor of all of this. I am God. I'm the master. And so follow me. And then even when they don't listen to him because of X or Y, here it's discouragement and harsh labor. He doesn't forsake them. Like, he goes over their head to a God that's more evidence to them, a master, a Lord that's more evidence to them, and gives him the order. I don't know. I'm really starting to get into a ramble now.
No, I like it. Do you think he maybe went with Lord? Because Lord means master, right?
That's my understanding of it. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think he maybe was revealing himself in that way because that's what they knew with Pharaoh?
I don't know, because in 4, he says, "This is my name forever." Like, it, unless
Yeah, but it is still.
Pharaoh is the archetype for all time. Yeah, like, because we know earthly masters, he reveals himself as master. Because we know earthly fathers, he reveals himself as father. Yeah, that's my name forever, the Lord. Yeah, that's not a bad thought. And then that when they don't listen to him as Lord, he goes to the Lord that they know and that they do believe in, that they do fear, and then gives orders to him.
It's weird. It puts a weird spin on the whole covenant with Moses too. If that's, then the covenant with Moses is like a servant in a way. But which is, it's just odd. I don't know that I can make that claim. Like, I think that is the Christian claim to make. Because we're like, oh, they're in the service of the old law type thing, and that seems like kind of a Christian straw man argument to them. Because I don't know that you could really say that though, because he says later, or maybe it was before that, when he goes to Pharaoh, he says, "Let Israel go. Israel is my son, my firstborn." So there's a son relationship as well. It's not just as a Lord servant relationship in a way. Craig, you look like you were gonna say something a minute ago. What was it?
I don't think I would be contributing anything.
Of course you would.
I kind of have a couple of, maybe, I think they're related thoughts. So when you were mentioning, he asks the question something like, why sort of have this level of like this the necessity of faith. And I think it kind of relates to the lordship thing too. I think so, to the degree that God holds back his to the degree that God's involvement in our everyday lives is hidden from us, the more aware we are of our interdependence upon each other as people. And so I think so his like withholding some revelation of himself to us on too consistent of a basis allows for us to value each other more. And then his declaration of lordship over us allows us to, in the midst of like valuing each other, not forget that he ultimately is the overseer in general, right? So like for our day-to-day living, for the most part, what we have to worry about is dealing with each other, but our lives ultimately are under his lordship, right? So that's kind of how I see the interplay of the the necessity of faith and his like restriction of holding himself back in some form. Yeah, I think they're tightly interconnected. You know, because if we had if it was too easy for us to directly relate to God, we might forget each other, something like that. And if we became too important to each other, we would forget his lordship, right? So there's like this balance that has to be played in between those two kind of sides of the same coin or whatever. I don't know if that relates to what we were just talking about, but that's what came to mind.
It's very interesting. I'm gonna have to chew on that a lot. I mean, I like all of that you brought that up. It's definitely worth thinking on.
Because people often ask that. That's like a frequent kind of criticism from atheists / deconstructors / questioning Christians is where is he, right? Like in the midst of it, like people suffering in Ukraine, right? Like where is he? You know, like what's our proper response to that? And is the only proper response to that is, oh, it's all in God's hands? Or is part of the proper response to that, oh, these are my brothers and sisters, and like they're partially my responsibility. It's not just all in God. Like it's the very fact that I'm partially responsible for my neighbor's well-being is under his lordship, right? So like to the extent that my neighbor is experiencing the absence of God, that to some degree is my problem, right? It's not all my neighbor's problem and it's not God's fault, right? It's something like that.
Thing that's good. It reminded me, for some reason, when you said that, it reminded me of and this might just be it's probably just a personal context, but it reminded me of the passage in Genesis when Judah basically vouches for Benjamin when they have to take Benjamin to Egypt, and the father doesn't want him to go because he's like, if anything happens to Benjamin, I'm gonna die. Like the suffering will be too much, the grief will be too much. And Judah says, basically puts his life on the line and says, what does he say? It just, every single time I read this passage, like it just makes me, like almost brings me to tears every single time, because I just see the Father as like God the Father. And I think I maybe mentioned this to you, Mitch, one time. I can't remember, but when I really started to change the way I kind of believed, and when I say I'm a universalist and stuff, it's I don't think that's the right term because I believe in hell and everything. But when my cousin died, I just remember thinking like, wow, a lot of he overdosed, and I don't think it was on purpose, but I think a lot of Christians would probably look at it and say he wasn't living right. He probably wasn't a Christian. He probably was in hell, maybe some people would say. But just my thought was just like kind of the same thing in Judah, like how the hell can I show my face before God knowing I have a relative, like if that's the case, if he is in hell, like how could I literally go before God and say, no, I'm fine being here. I'm fine rejoicing and having that remembrance. And I guess as a kid, you could say, oh, maybe my memory would be wiped or something, but it's like, it's that verse and where Paul says, I could wish myself a curse from Christ for my brethren. And it's like, and so every time I read this part with Judah, it's kind of that thoughts in my head of like coming back to your father without your brother with you. It's like, how could I show my face without him by my side? And like you said, we're all, with all this suffering in the world, we're all interconnected. And it's kind of that, maybe that realization of like, we're it seems like those categories in terms of neighbor and brother and friend are kind of relative. like how your neighbor could become your brother, like the closer you get to them and stuff. It just seems like those categories are, you can keep drawing people in, it's like your neighbor could be across the world, and then you can keep bringing them closer and closer into your own house type thing. So you're part of your family, and you even adopt them or something. And so, but he says, for your servant became surety for the lad from my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father forever. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. For how shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me? Lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father. I don't know why, it just always reminds me of like the grief God must have when he loses one of his little ones. And it's like, that just always, every time I read that, I'm just like, man, I don't know how I could step into eternity without bringing up the lost sheep, I guess.
Guys, I hate to do this so suddenly, but I gotta get out of here.
Do you have to poop? Is that what it is? I'm just kidding.
I'll tell you if that's what it was.
That's all right, man.
Well,
That was really
well,
nice, Jason.
Thanks.
Totally agree.
Well, get out of here, Greg. Go, man. Thanks for doing this. It's great. You always bring a lot of good stuff. So
We won't talk about you too bad. So yeah.
I appreciate it. Go on without me.
Seaman.
yeah.
Things aren't the same without me.
I know. He's this little light in the corner. He's gone now. Anything else though you guys want to touch on before we wrap it up? Or
I don't think so. I actually meant to bring up, of course I just remember this now that Craig is off the call, but I meant to bring up like how you guys feel about me posting the stuff. Like I've posted our first 2 conversations on YouTube. I texted about it, whatever. I didn't hear anything back, so I was like, all right, it must be cool for me to post it, but I wanted to make sure, like, I don't want to like have any sort of weirdness or anything. So if like there's ever any hesitation, or like I think I might have said something that I don't want out there, or it'd be best if we don't have this particular conversation out there, whatever the case is, like I never want to kind of violate someone's privacy like that. So
I'm totally fine with it.
all right, cool.
Yeah. I'm the one who
Cool.
tried to make a case for slavery the first session.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and then our last one was turtlenecks all the way down. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
very, very sacred conversation.
Yeah, I actually found, now that Craig's gone too, I found that part where he says, the Pharaoh's servant said to him, how long shall this man be a snare to us? Basically, do you not know that Egypt is destroyed? Then Moses and Aaron brought again to Pharaoh and said to them, go serve the Lord your God. Who are the ones with you that are going? And Moses said, we will go with our young and our old, with our sons and our daughters, with our flocks and our herds. We will go, for we must hold a feast to the Lord. Then he said to them, the Lord had better be with you when I let you and your little ones go. Beware, for evil is ahead of you. Not so. Go now, you who are men, and serve the Lord, for that is what you desired. And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. So that was the part where he's like, only your men can go.
Pray that I do not alter the deal further. That's so funny.
Yeah. Yeah, and it comes back up, I think, 11 in the end of chapter 10 too. He says, but Moses said, you must also wait. Pharaoh called to Moses, go serve the Lord, only let your flocks and your herds be kept back. Let your little ones also go with you. So then he's like, okay, I'll let your little ones, but leave your flocks and your herds. And Moses says, no, because we need those for burnt offerings. And then that's when the Lord hardens Pharaoh's heart. And I think the death of the firstborn is after that. I don't know. But so I found it after Craig left. It took me, I don't know why I couldn't find it. But.
I think there might be something in that that kind of relates to I'll bring them up again. What Jordan Peterson says about like not hiding things in the fog. And then he also talks, maybe it's in the same kind of concept. He talks about a conflict delayed is a conflict multiplied, right? So it's like even if we strip it of this idea of God, sort of doing the Darth Vader thing, right? Like pray that I don't alter the deal further. It's like if you if there's negative things coming and you ignore them, they're not just going to stay the same usually, right? It's usually going to compound. It's usually going to kind of snowball or whatever into something probably even worse. And then when you neglect a potential blessing, let's say it's like a tremendous blessing, like a particularly good blessing, chances are, this isn't always the case though, so it doesn't quite fit, but it seems like chances are you're going to have to settle for something less the next time a blessing comes around if you neglect the initial offer, so to speak. Not this, I've experienced counter examples to that, but yeah. Like the unmerited sort of like favor thing. There have been so many times in my life where I had opportunities that I neglected and sort of put myself through hell because of that, and then just ended up getting even like more ridiculous, undeserved favor afterwards, which is kind of also in keeping with God's character. But yeah. Anyways, yeah.
I think I know what you mean though. There should be this, at least a healthy fear and or healthy balance of like a reverence for God's opportunities where you want to jump on them the moment he presents them. And this fear of missing out on God's story that we should have, but then at the same time to have that balance of to remember that that there can almost be a greater blessing in the measure of repentance that could come after like the revelation that you missed his blessing or something, and then just there's almost there could be a greater blessing, I guess, hidden in the I don't know. Mitch, you got anything else?
I feel like we have fully understood and explained everything about these two chapters. We have mastered them.
Yeah, tell me more about Mali and Mushi.
Oh, nuts. You got me.
I don't know why, that's my favorite one.
There's a lot here. It's hard to take its measure.
Yeah. There's a lot. Yeah, there's so much here. Even in the last two, I was like, man, we talked for 2 hours in chapters 3 and 4, I think. Yeah. And I was like, and there's still stuff we didn't even touch on. I was like, man, we didn't get to this or that. This
sure.
book, though.
This book.
Yeah, we could stay in Genesis 1 through 4 if we wanted for days, I'm sure. My cousin Chris, he was telling me that he was like, yeah, we started at my church, we decided to do this Bible study and read through Genesis together for a month. And he was like, it ended up taking us 2 years. It's like, yeah, that happens.
Well, we'll likely be after it for the remainder of our lives, God willing.
Yeah.
Do you I don't know how to even really ask this question. This was the only other thing I had that I had like circled here was God goes to Pharaoh and he gives him one thing and he says, let my people go. And that's like talking about God revealing himself to Israel. Because then Pharaoh says, who is the Lord? I don't know the Lord.
Mm.
So is there
Mm.
something there where God's trying to reveal himself to Pharaoh as in like, this is my nature to let, like the Jubilee nature or something, like let the captives go free type thing. And Pharaoh refuses to know him.
That's a way of looking at it, I think.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I got. Sorry, guys.
I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. No, but that's the tip of the iceberg revelation-wise. I mean, it's not like God leaves it at that, but the messaging gets pretty intense with all of these plagues.
Yeah. I don't think I have anything left in me.
Let's go the way of Craig.
Yes.
All right. Go poop.
That's right.
As legend has it.
Legend has it. All right, guys. Well, thanks for doing this. I'll send you the video. And yeah, you can post it whenever you want. I don't mind. So
Cool. Cool,
Nice to
cool.
talk to you guys.
All right.
Likewise. Yeah. Take it
Bye.
easy.
Good night.